Hi, I'm Hank Fields. I'm a citizen of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. Michigan is home to the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. And there are 12 tribes with whom the federal government acknowledges a political relationship. Each one operates as a sovereign nation with its own laws and government. This video is about the rights of Two-Spirit and LGBTQ+ people in our communities, what protections exist, how the laws work, and where you can turn for support. We'll hear from people who live and work in this space, judges, lawyers, advocates, who can help explain how tribal, state, and federal laws apply, depending on where you are. And we'll talk about marriage rights, civil rights, and how laws like the Indian Civil Rights Act come into play on tribal land. It's not always straightforward, but by the end, you'll have a clearer picture of your rights and where to find the help you might need.
Bojo, Anin Kinewia, and Danoe Maganadog, Wabanongi Jigindigo, Danlin Jibe Indishnakas, Bautin and Donjaba, Makwadodam, Yanijimin Ishnabe Koyandao, Itkwakazondao, Algo Koyandao. Hello, my name is Danlin Jibe. I'm from the Sault Ste. Marie area. I am Bear Clan, I am Two-Spirit. So Two-Spirit is an umbrella term for indigenous peoples identifying gender identity within tribes. Within my Anishinaabe peoples, we have 4 separate genders, so like masculine male, masculine female, and feminine female. Not every tribe embraces Two-Spirit. They have their own variations of that, or not at all. But the fact remains that our indigenous peoples have practiced gender roles and gender identity and marriage equality long before colonization became a thing here. And so all of that was lost since the settlers, but we're like slowly regaining that and have embraced regaining it since then.
Let's break down how these 3 governments, tribal, state, and federal, team up to protect you. When you're off the reservation, Michigan state laws usually take charge. On the reservation, that's where tribal laws come into play. And federal laws, they've got your back both on and off the reservation, depending on the situation. While the U.S. Bill of Rights and Supreme Court decisions protect you from state actions, they work a bit differently when it comes to tribal governments. On tribal lands, you're protected by tribal laws and something called the Indian Civil Rights Act. We call it ICRA for short. Think of ICRA as a special set of rules that bring some, but not all, of the Bill of Rights protections to tribal lands. Sound complicated? Don't worry. We've got Professors Tweedy and Fletcher here to break it all down for you.
My name is Ann Tweedy. I'm a professor at University of South Dakota, Knudsen School of Law. tribes are exercising their sovereignty when they decide whether or not to protect same-sex marriage or provide anti-discrimination protections. Tribes started to recognize marriage equality, so that goes all the way back to 2008. So tribes were really at the forefront of recognizing marriage equality. So you had tribes really jumping in and setting the stage for marriage equality and really being leaders in the area. In terms of setbacks, you also had tribes that passed Defense of Marriage Acts, and a few of those are still on the books. So we had Navajo Nation passing a Defense of Marriage Act, which is a ban on same-sex marriage. So you had tribes on the other side as well.
My name is Matthew Fletcher. I'm a citizen in the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians and a law professor at the University of Michigan. So when it comes to federal law vis-a-vis sexual orientation, if it's law that we think is persuasive and is consistent with our culture and tradition, we might use it as what we call persuasive authority. I mean, we might follow that as a model. But if it doesn't, then we won't. And the same is true with state law. So states can't impose their legal regimes on us at all. And we can choose from state and federal law the things that we are interested in. We can borrow those as models, make them our own, sort of domesticate them ourselves. But as a general matter, that we don't have to do what they say, so to speak. And so we have a lot of opportunity to expand protections if we see fit on questions of sexual orientation or race and gender discrimination or anything, disability issues, whatever we want to do. And like I said, as a general matter, tribes have a lot of pressure from both within the community because of our culture to be sort of more of a more egalitarian society than you'll see in state and federal governments.
The relationship between federal, state, and tribal legal systems is very complex. I would say the federal legal system is kind of considered to be, and not fairly so for tribes, but at the apex, and then can dictate the limits of tribal sovereignty under federal law, and then to some extent state sovereignty as well. States are considered to have less of an influence on tribal law, so states historically have been held to have no role to play on the reservation, the idea being that state jurisdiction stops at the reservation borders. That's changed to some extent over time, but it's pretty much limited to non-tribal members, so states can have some authority with respect to non-tribal members, still can't govern tribes or tribal members for the most part. And then tribes have authority, and it's considered to be their own inherent authority, not delegated from the federal government. But the federal government does believe it has the right to set the limits of that authority, and so it does things like limit tribal sentencing authority, things like that. Also furthers tribal self-determination through several statutes do that. So federal authority is a double-edged sword or a mixed bag for tribes, I would say. We have the Supreme Court recognizing same-sex marriage nationwide, so states have to follow that since that was a constitutional decision. Tribes have more discretion because they're not bound by the Constitution, but rather a federal statute called the Indian Civil Rights Act. Indian
tribes are partially governed by the Indian Civil Rights Act, which is a federal law from 1968. It includes a requirement that all tribes provide or guarantee due process, equal protection to all persons under tribal jurisdiction. So that's sort of the minimum baseline. There is a federal law out there that requires tribes to guarantee equal protection. So there's an anti-discrimination principle under federal law. And tribes generally tend to follow that, but we actually don't have to. Tribes are sort of separate sovereigns and have authority to make their own judgments as to the kind of protections they're going to offer their people under their jurisdiction, their citizens, employees, other people, etc.
When it comes to rights in tribal communities, the picture is layered. There's federal law, like the Indian Civil Rights Act, but those don't always tell the whole story for Native people. What really matters is what each tribal nation decides for itself. 8 of the tribes in Michigan have legalized same-sex marriage. They didn't wait for the state or federal government. They led with their own values and their sovereignty.
Buju, wabana sekwe indijnakas genuindo dem, kichiwi kwedown yindonjaba, Peshabi town and Dida. Hello, my name is Joanne Cook, and currently I am the Chief Judge for the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians, and also sit on the appellate court for my home community, the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa Chippewa Indians. I would say from originally, each tribal constitution in general, has their statement and their rights of tribal members. And so in there, it states, that each person, is protected, that, you have your privacy, you have your right to be who you are, in your house, in your home, and that's one protection. But I would say a more recent law within the marriage statute, which was adopted in 2013, it was changed to say that 2 people instead of a man or a woman. And so that was the way that the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians were including people, whether, same-sex, LGBTQ community, two-spirited, the term that people choose to use. So that was the way that they were including and not excluding people from their community that were living there, a part of their community. And so far, it'll be up to 10 years soon, and I don't see the law changing. I think that was part of it, that to include everyone. I think that's the way that tribal communities are always looking to include and find ways to ensure that individual rights are protected.
Back in the days, not that long ago, when states were tripping over themselves to pass laws banning same-sex marriage, for example, Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians is one of the tribes in the country that decided to go out of the way and pass a law explicitly allowing for same-sex marriage. And there are some other tribes around the country who did that, and there was sort of a sense that maybe there should have been more. But I don't think there had to be, because most tribes weren't doing that in the first place.
From my understanding, the Sioux tribe adapts their laws based on state and federal laws within the state of Michigan and the United States. What would I like to see from my tribe more is to create their own sovereign laws that do not have to adhere to state and federal laws. An example of this would be the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians, where in 2013, they, this is what, prior to the Supreme Court making it nationwide, the Little Traverse Band passed a marriage equality law within their tribes. Even though they'll be sovereignly recognized, they won't be federally recognized. They were the first tribe in Michigan to pass such a law.
As Professor Fletcher pointed out, while the Indian Civil Rights Act does apply on tribal reservations, tribal courts actually get to decide for themselves how to apply these protections to their own governments. Here's the fascinating part. What we understand as equal protection or due process off the reservation might look quite different on tribal lands. And even though U.S. Supreme Court decisions carry weight, tribal courts can chart their own path when interpreting civil rights. When it comes to Michigan specifically, you'll find that tribal courts weave their own cultural heritage and traditions into how they interpret civil rights. It's really important to know that many Native communities here in Michigan have long-standing traditions of respecting Two-Spirit people, and this video will help you understand how these beautiful traditions continue to protect you today.
Ani, vidwewe dam na dejnakas, kinuje kaning indonjaba, mukwaro dam. My name is Leah Teeple, and I am the Chief Judge here at Bay Mills Indian Community. There is no one more powerful or scarier than an Indian woman. And if you mess with our babies, we will come at you. And everyone in this community is our babies. We are aunties, we are mothers, we are grandmothers, and these are our children, and these are our people, and we are dedicated to the fight for their advancements and their freedoms, and for them to be able to exist freely, just like anybody else can on any given day. I have seen our people mobilize and come together to ensure that this community is a place where all people feel safe and all people know they're accepted. I know that in my community that anybody could come here and be safe and protected, because that's just how we operate. We cherish all life, and we're committed to that.
My name is Siadam Edmo. I'm Shoshone Bannock, Nez Perce, and Yakima, and I am the proud co-editor of the Tribal Equity Toolkit. Coming from a family that has many members who identify as LGBT and Two-Spirit, I think allowed me through this work to realize, no matter who you are in Indian country, you know or love someone who is a LGBT or Two-Spirit person. And that means we all come from Two-Spirit families. And that means we all have skin in the game in this fight. One of the good lessons that I learned, especially as an ally, to always listen with your heart. I think it's that openness to always evolve and improve and demonstrate both our love and care for Two-Spirit people within our tribal communities, but also to evolve how we utilize our sovereignty as tribal nations and what causes we utilize it for. And this is one that keeps families together, keeps communities together. There are so many things working against us in Indian country. We need everybody. We need everyone to be able to succeed as tribal communities. We need more speakers of our language. We need more carriers of our culture. We need more bold leaders, and we need more caregivers. That's the role that many Two-Spirit people have played historically in our own home tribal communities. And those are the positions, I think, that we can create once again with new models of inclusion.
Tribal courts utilize the 7 grandfather teachings, and in particular, the teaching of respect. Tribal courts utilize that in order to understand and to have dialogue with the people that come before the court. So in essence, respect is one of the main teachings, and it provides to us that in the way we conduct court, the way that we look at the individuals, but more in essence, it brings that understanding of equality. We know that the individuals that come before us are their own persons, and that it's not for the court to judge or to look at more than who they are and why they come into court. It's about fairness, equality, and treating each individual with respect. Respect has been built into tribal constitutions, tribal law, and is utilized the same way in tribal courts. But there may be a bigger understanding and meaning of respect, which is the cultural aspect and how we as Anishinaabe are taught to respect all of creation, which includes not only plants, animals, nature, but also the individuals that live within our community.
In one way, we're incredibly lucky in that our leadership is deeply invested, especially in advancing the rights of Two-Spirit people. And so under our current leadership, we not only very early in the fight for marriage equality, recognized same-gender marriage, added it to our code, and I had the distinct honor of performing the second same-gender wedding, and I was so excited, and it was very celebrated here. And one of the areas that I have found disappointing historically, legally, and nationwide is that Two-Spirit communities have been underserved when it comes to the protection of these sorts of rights. And now we're on the cusp of realizing and recognizing and protecting that every human being deserves the exact same protections, that there is no classification that makes one entitled to more and one less than. And we have always, but even more in modern times, really led that fight to protect those rights of everyone. In our tribal community, Two-Spirit people are to be cherished, and they're very important when it comes to ceremonial things. And so they do have a special mark of respect here. Part of our resilience has been our allies, and I find as a whole, indigenous communities are dedicated to being an ally of the marginalized and to reaching back and offering a helping hand to those who are climbing behind us, just as those who have gone ahead of us have offered a helping hand. And so I believe that the atmosphere is incredibly unique when it comes to tribal nations and tribal justice and tribal protections, in that we have a cultural and a moral and just a community dedication to protecting the rights of all people, no matter what the classification may be.
I mean, there definitely been huge changes if you think about like sexuality in the law. When I was clerking, Lawrence versus Texas was decided that overturns Texas's same-sex sodomy law. And so before that, same-sex relationships could basically be criminalized. That was a huge change. And then I would say the tribes were sophisticated when I started and continue to grow in terms of like government and tribal law. But initially, it seemed like a lot of tribes weren't even covering marriage at all. And then I think the same-sex marriage movement kind of inspired them to, like Coquille tribe was the first tribe to legalize same-sex marriage. So they didn't have any marriage law. Then they enacted one specifically to allow for same-sex marriage. So I think that tribes are taking up new areas of governance.
Some of the foundational principles of federal Indian law are that state law is no force in Indian country, and federal government doesn't really have any jurisdiction to tell us what to do in terms of how we govern ourselves. So Congress might pass a law like the Indian Civil Rights Act and say, you should do this, but like I said, we don't really have to if we don't want to.
So prejudice against two-spirited people is often believed to be kind of an incorporation of that colonialism. So that's another thing to think about when tribes are considering whether to protect two-spirited people, that presumably they don't want to buy into and enforce those colonialist ideas. And one of the interesting things about tribal laws protecting same-sex marriage is that often they were encouraged and advocated for by tribal members, so they're very grassroots, and so that's an exciting aspect of those tribal marriage equality laws, and tribes look at their customs and traditions in order to see whether to recognize same-sex marriage, for instance.
The great thing about tribal communities is that we know who we are, and we have very specific understandings of who we are and what we're supposed to be doing, and we're here for everybody in some respects. So there's a lot of room and opportunity for good things to happen in Indian country right now. That's a big sign of hope for me.
So my name is Heather Johnson. I'm a fixed-term faculty or professor at Michigan State University College of Law. My expertise area is in law, sex, and gender. I think that it's really important to know that law is man-made, and mostly historically made by white men, not women or other people. So voting was only for white men until it wasn't. Slavery was a law until it was not. Segregation was a law until it was not. So if there is a law that affects you or someone you know or community that you care about, it doesn't mean it has to be the law forever. It can be changed through a legal democratic process.
The Tribal Equity Toolkit is a set of sample policies and resolutions for tribes to consider as they make the transition from these IRA form constitutions that we inherited from the US government toward ones that I think really capture some of our traditional values around valuing and caring for Two-Spirit individuals and families. It addresses issues like the definition of family, discrimination that a person might experience as a part of receiving services from a particular tribe, housing, education, jury service. The Tribal Equity Toolkit offers elected tribal leaders, longtime high-level tribal employees, points of discussion around specific policies that might impact the life and experience of Two-Spirit and LGBT people within their tribal community. The Tribal Equity Toolkit utilized a model where we really began with sample policy by engaging with Indian law attorneys and policy experts to write some of the policies. And then we turned to LGBT policy experts across the nation to modify utilizing the best research and the best, most forward-thinking language when it came to LGBT policy. So actually, tribal leaders are getting something really special that I think states and other local counties and stuff don't get, which is the opportunity to have access to the most progressive and protective measures defined by LGBT leaders and legal experts right home to their tribal communities.
Each level of government, tribal, state, and federal, has a role in protecting your rights, and knowing how they connect helps you understand your legal options and where to seek help if needed. Professor Tweedy will explain further.
In terms of how to navigate gaps and legal protections among state, federal, and tribal governments, it can get complicated. I would look first at whether the action that someone is, if somebody's wanting to challenge an employment discrimination action, you want to look at whether that occurred on reservation or in Indian country. And then if it did, also look at who the employer is. So is it a tribal government or is it a tribally owned business? Then you're most likely looking at tribal law. If it's a non-native owned business, it's more of a gray area. So the state may have authority and the tribe may have authority, and we have some pretty mushy tests on that. So I would also look to, if you're in one of those gray areas, I would try to get legal help, like look to Michigan Indian Legal Services or another legal services organization to get some guidance on that. And then if it's off reservation, then it's generally going to be state or federal law. You might have some limited exceptions if it's the tribal government acting, like exercising treaty rights. I know that's kind of far afield from what we're talking about, but the tribe would have jurisdiction over that even if it was off reservation. So there are some limited exceptions there, but the reservation is a good clue to what laws are going to apply.
Understanding these different levels of protection helps you know exactly where to turn when you need legal assistance. As a Michigan resident, You benefit from a robust set of state laws designed to protect your rights and interests when you are off reservation. These Michigan state protections work hand in hand with federal laws that cover all Americans, giving you multiple layers of legal protection.
Michigan has a good rating for relationship and parental recognition, largely because of Obergefell versus Hodges, right? So that's the Supreme Court case about same-sex marriage, or the ability for same-sex partners to be married. That included medical decision-making, authority for married same-sex couples, separate adoption for married same-sex couples, and joint adoption for married same-sex couples. Michigan also provides for what's called a voluntary acknowledgement of parentage, and they have family services non-discrimination laws, like adoption non-discrimination for LGBTQ parents and foster care non-discrimination for LGBTQ parents. They also have recognition for parents using assisted reproduction. Michigan does allow people to change their gender marker on their driver's license, the gender marker on their birth certificates, have neutral options of X for all their identity documents, and facilitate a name change process. The Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act is the premier marquee civil rights legislation for the state of Michigan, enacted in 1976. It classically protects all of what lawyers call the protected characteristics, consistent with federal civil rights laws. So we're talking religion, race, color, national origin, sex. It also, though, protects a few additional characteristics that are not protected federally, including age, height, weight, familial status, marital status, and in 2022, Michigan expanded the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation and gender identity. And so that's a huge addition to have those protections enshrined in the state civil rights law.
My name is Jay Kaplan, and I've been an attorney now, it's going to be 40 years this year, and I've been very fortunate to be able to focus on social justice as an attorney. We've made a lot of progress towards LGBTQ rights, especially in our state, just in the past, 7 or 8 years. People should know that they have comprehensive civil rights protections under Michigan civil rights laws. And we are one of 22 states that have these protections. 28 states don't have these protections. So we are very fortunate that we are in this place. In 2023, the legislature finally passed, and I say finally because it took 46 years to get there. They finally passed an amendment to our state civil rights laws providing explicit protections against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity and expression in the areas of employment, housing, education, and this broad category that's called public accommodations, which basically pertains to any kind of program that's open to the public. And we were lucky and fortunate that with our current Secretary of State, we were able to get a change in the policy regarding a gender marker change on a driver's license or state ID. Now you can self-attest to what your gender identity is. With regarding our birth certificate, the legislature just passed legislation that took effect in April of this year that no longer requires that you have to undergo surgery to correct your birth certificate with the gender marker. You have the same protections as other, protected classes like race and age and sex and religion. So, we really do have strong protections, and it's a matter of utilizing those and filing these complaints with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, filing cases in courts.
If you feel that you're being discriminated against, I think I would always articulate or request people to document everything, right? So sometimes we think we shrug something off, or we say microaggressions, oh, it's just so It's this little thing. And yet, as we know, those little microaggressions are not so micro, and sometimes over time they can add up. So the better that you document everything, even if you're ready to seek counsel or maybe seek advice on what to do about it, or file a claim, you'll have a history of what's happened or what you can look back on and reference for your records. I think it's good to know the law, but particularly if you're someone who could be targeted for who you are, it's probably important to know if you're in school what the educational workplace laws for your district, for your building say. If you're employed, what your workplace, for example, the anti-bullying rules, is there a policy? What are the HR policies? So to the degree that you can know the law, not only the local law, the law of the organization that you work for, but also the state laws, the better. I would not take matters into your own hands ever. I would really encourage people to seek legal support and advice, because what you don't want to do is end up doing something that would hurt your case.
The message I would send to tribal members advocating for themselves under Michigan law is that we do have comprehensive civil rights protections that are supposed to accord us equal opportunity and fairness in our state, and to utilize those. And if they believe that they're being discriminated against, to contact the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, to contact the ACLU of Michigan, our LGBTQ+ project, to see how they can remedy situations when they are being discriminated against.
Obviously, the private counsel is always an option if you can afford it, but if not, there's some really incredible legal aid options out there. And sometimes, almost every lawyer that I know will do a free half an hour or free hour of advice. So take them up on that. Call and say, hey, I have this issue. I think this is something I need help, and see what they say.
The most important thing to remember is that you're never alone. Your rights are protected under multiple systems of law, and there are dedicated people and resources available to help you navigate any legal challenges you might face. Whether you need guidance, support, or representation, there are professionals ready to assist you every step of the way. Our hope is that you have learned more about your rights and know where you can turn if you need help.